Welcome back, everybody, to the Triad of the Force podcast, a Puerto Rican podcast for friends coming together to talk about Star Wars and do deep dives about all the media that we love. Welcome to our new episodes talking about Skeleton Crew, or as we affectionately call it nowadays, Skelly Crew, or Resistance Broadcast call it Galactic Goonies, or X-Ray. I don't know. There's so many clever names out on the interwebs about what to call this show that we decided not to fall trap to it and have a mediocre name. So this is just Triad of the Forest Skeleton Crew review series. And as always, if you haven't, please make sure to subscribe, follow us on Blue Sky, not that other site. Instagram if you want to see some fun reels, even though it's also owned by a horrible billionaire. But without further ado, let's talk about Skeleton Crew. And as always, for our review series, this is not a one-man show, and it's not a Diet of the Force either. Although today it is. Unfortunately, Nani's not here to join us in the Skeleton Crew discussion. She is sick and sends everybody a hello and hugs and warm hugs, since it's cold here in Chicago. And congratulations to Nani, by the way, who passed the bar. As everyone who has been listening knows, Nani has been absent from the podcast for a couple of weeks, even though she finally returned in the last month or so. But she finally got her notice that she passed the bar. So congratulations. She's a nerd, and we expected it. But it's still happy tidings, and congratulations to her. So looking forward to talking to her Skeleton Crew once she recovers. But for our guest today, we decided it's a pirate show. We need a captain. And who better than the Pirate King himself, of all those scallywags out there in Star Wars fandom and interwebs and trivia and all those things? The man himself, Ken Napzok.
My friend, Goose. It's good to be here. I'm happy to be your captain. I'm not so much a captain as I am just the grizzled, bearded weirdo who's sleeping on the ship when you take it over. But I'm here with you.
I think we can be like in the Doge department, the Department of
Yeah.
Government
Yep.
Efficiency. We can just be
Yep.
co-captains,
Let's
because
do it.
everyone knows that two people are always better to maximize efficiency. So I think in that regards, we can be those two, or we can be Jack Sparrow and Captain Barbosa. My list of captains is quickly running out. So if you want to, I don't know if you know about other co-captains in fiction or history.
Not in terms of the pirate world. I even said on ForceCenter today, I am aware of a lot of pirate stories, myths, and literature and movies. I just don't have a long list of names.
No, nor I. Like I know that like pirate films have always been a staple of childhood growing up, but for some reason, nothing really comes to mind besides the Muppet Treasure Island, which is a classic, and I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit as we discuss Skeleton Crew, which was an injection of joy for sure. But before we get too deep into Skeleton Crew, many know you. You're a famous man, an infamous man.
Infamous.
But there might be two or three people, namely my parents, who might be listening to this podcast who don't have Blue Sky accounts, never had Twitter accounts, and probably never even saw the Schmoedowns. So, who is Ken Napzok?
Who is Ken Napzok? First of all, to your parents who are listening, they have done a spectacular job raising you. I love hanging out with you. The few times you've had the chance to do it, you are a gentleman through and through. My name's Ken Napzok. I am the author of the book Why We Love Star Wars. I used to appear in some roundtable shows that kind of helped launch a lot of the industry that we have now. But more importantly, along with Joseph Crimshaw and Jennifer Landa, we have ForceCenter, which is a show that celebrates and digs deep into Star Wars and life and the themes found within the space franchise that we love so much. So I'm just a man who likes to ramble about Star Wars.
And ramble we shall, because I think that there are many things to ramble about. And you mentioned hanging out together, and I feel very, very lucky to have been able to participate in events that have allowed me to travel to a Western state in which you reside, so that we have been able to share a martini or two. and it's definitely been a privilege. And I think last time we hung out was during the Acolyte
Yep.
at the Hollywood Roosevelt, beautiful, beautiful bar.
Mm.
So much history. I always like to every time I step inside there, I always feel like I'm either in a time machine or I'm going to board the Tower of Terror elevator
Yeah,
because it looks exactly like
it
the
does.
Hollywood Tower of Terror. But one of the things that I always think about from that hotel is that that's where they did the first Oscars. So it's
Hmm.
always it's a place of history before from the class of the Hollywood elites celebrating their awards, and then scallywags like us
Yeah.
that have come to celebrate Star Wars amongst drinks.
Yeah.
Uh, the world of the Acolyte was very different when we were having drinks when that
Mm.
show came out to the
Mm.
world of Skeleton Crew. So
Yeah.
obviously we can't talk about the stories that we're uh, watching or reading without realizing the context and the world in which one they were created and two they're released into the world. And I think that in many ways it's very interesting to compare Acolyte and Skeleton Crew just because they are opposite shows released in opposite times.
Mm. Yeah.
And I wanna hear your reaction to that because when
Hmm.
Acolyte came out, it's a show about diversity, and not that Skeleton Crew isn't, but it's Leslie
Mm.
Headland was very intentionally doing a show about diversity and equity and
Hmm.
inclusion and justice.
Hmm.
So Jedi, not DEI. Uh, and it came out in a climate of in the Biden administration, in a in a in, in a divisive climate, for lack of a
Sure.
better term. And now with Skeleton Crew, it's still the Biden administration, but we're in post November elections. And spoiler alerts for people that aren't keeping up with politics, we have Trump 47,
Mm.
unfortunately. So
Hmm.
it's an inverse of that world. And while Acolyte was a murder mystery,
Mm.
Skeleton Crew is just a fun coming of age story of kids getting lost in the woods and getting into hijinks. But how has that perspective been, or whiplash, or whatever you want to call it,
Mm.
been for you going from the Acolyte and what it was and the time in which it came out to now Skeleton Crew and what it is and the time that it's now living in?
Yeah, there was heading up to November. I think there was this sense of hope among a lot of
Mhm,
people that I'll say this generic term, heroes will prevail. I don't necessarily automatically elevate politicians to hero level, but you know what I mean? Where it's like
mhm,
we fight for the light because the light is there, and we've all been fighting,
mhm,
and we got some momentum, and things going to happen, and then it didn't. And I think there was a lot of people turned to Skeleton Crew before it even came out of like, you know what I need is just kind of kids on bikes in a forest, and I think that's very present, and I think that's some of the joy that's there. Acolyte did a lot of things well as a series. One of the things it did for me is challenge me as a Star Wars fan because it really started the process of we're going to analyze the Jedi Order,
mhm,
that a process that George Lucas kind of ends in the prequels. And it took a deep dive on heroes that in a challenging way,
mhm,
and I love that about the series. But that makes your brain kind of work a little bit, and I think a lot of people looking at Skeleton Crew is like a little simple. I think much like A New Hope, which came out in a post Nixon, post Vietnam, things are still really bad, but let's just go have some fun.
mhm,
That movie, that show was A New Hope was about a lot more. I think this series is about a lot more too. And it is, you're right, 100%. It's a coming of age story. And we are all whim in the mirror saying, grow up, you grow up, as we try to find ourselves
mhm,
in a
mhm,
system that creates a lot of the pain that we're in, a system that we can't get out of. That's a lot of what's played on the planet of Adden. I was really drawn to that. Shout out to our buddy, I said it on Force Center today, but shout out to our buddy Scotty J. Rowe at
mhm, mhm,
Bombadcast, who is
mhm.
a teacher and had a great thread on Blue Sky
I was just about
of
to say, yep.
yeah, of the system that is going on here that can destroy. I don't think the parents are villains. They shouldn't be thought of as that, but they are positioned as such. They are positioned in the opposition of youth and dreams and finding
Mhm, mhm.
yourself because they too probably had those squashed. And I feel we're all kind of in that where our hope, if you lean a certain way politically or just
Mhm.
had any kind of faith or hope in a better tomorrow, that's been kind of squashed.
Yeah.
And now we're trying to find our place and our purpose and our position and what we value and who we value and how we want to fight.
Mhm.
And I think maybe a simple story with big sweeping messages that we all can take and look at in the mirror with, I think might have some of what people are reacting to, even if they're not like you and I
Mhm.
engaged politically, where you need this or you're seeing
Yeah.
it or you're plugged in. I think that's how New Hope worked. I'm not directly comparing this to New Hope, but I'm saying it has the vibes and energy. At least I hope.
I mean, and I agree, and it's one of those things that, and I'll be upfront about it. And I've said on this podcast before, and I've said it to anyone who wants to listen to my opinion, which
Mm,
aren't that many people, to be fair. But I have told them that Skeleton Crew was a show that I wasn't enthused about, right? I mean, not
mhm,
that I wasn't
mhm.
looking forward to it. Like any new Star Wars, I'm ready. Like feed it to me. Let's go.
Yeah,
I'm ready. I'm ready to go.
yeah,
But when it was announcing, I was like, okay, it's a Star Wars show that's coming out.
yeah.
But my meat and potatoes was, and not to beat a dead horse, but Andor, and I was very excited for the Acolyte, because the Acolyte
Yeah.
for me was doing a lot of things that I wanted as a Star Wars fan, which is just like, let's just leave the things we know alone. Like I don't want to see X Wings. I don't want to see Luke Skywalker, even though he's my favorite
Mhm,
character. I just want to watch new characters do new things in a new era without the consequences that come with putting it, in the eras that we know and love. So
mm,
the Acolyte hit a lot of those boxes for me. So it was a very frustrating time, to say the least, because the vitriol of the Last Jedi era kind
mhm,
of came back with a vengeance, almost,
mhm,
in many ways. And when the Last Jedi came out, I still wasn't in social media and Star Wars social media as actively
mm.
as I unfortunately am now. So I
Yeah.
didn't get to feel what a lot of Last Jedi fans felt online from the
Mm,
backlash that came from, let's be honest about it, right wing conservative consumers that were just acting in a entitled way against it. And I can't speak for like how it was at that time, but for me, like everything that happened with the Acolyte felt like it was what that was at the time, and even hypercharged, because we're in this post-Trump era, pre-Trump era, which
yeah.
is insane to think about. So it was disheartening,
Yeah.
because like you said about heroes, and I'm not claiming that any of the politicians that we were voting for are heroes, far from it,
Mhm,
but it felt like we were coming into a sense of normalcy, right? In many ways,
mhm,
with leaving the Trump era, and then kind
mm,
of seeing things
mhm,
come back to some new normal. And
mhm,
then kind of Acolyte happened, and then the election happened, and there's so much that's ongoing with all that discussion, because we can't separate the media from the politics and the politics from the media, because they all feed each other. So it's been a very stressful environment for us who are watching these shows, because we know what it means and what it has meant, not just for us as
mm,
individuals, but also for the creators that go through the process of creation, but also through the process of then seeing the how the vitriol
yeah.
affects that art that is out there. So in many
Mm,
ways, Skeleton Crew was like that bit of hope of like that drop of fresh water in a desert when you
mm,
know you're going to go into war. And I was like, I hope that this hits on all cylinders, and it's just that injection of joy and happiness. And I was very lucky to see it on Monday with a couple of friends, Jane, who everyone knows is a trivia champion at Dragon Con, Laura Kelly, who's also a Schmodown veteran, our buddy Trey, and my partner. And it was there's something magical about seeing Star Wars on the big screen that I
mm,
feel Skeleton Crew was able to deliver in spades, because it not just gave us new Star Wars, which is always fun, but a Star Wars that is goes back to that naivete in many ways because you were talking about A New Hope, and
Mhm.
even though I agree with you with that A New Hope was kind of a palate cleanser in a post Nixon era, but it was
Mhm.
still quote unquote a mature story. It's still like
Yeah.
adults fighting a dark empire and blowing a machine of death up, and Skeleton Crew's like a light version of that. Just
Mhm.
kids having fun.
Mhm.
Even though I'm sure we're gonna get into deep themes about it, but just
Yeah.
having light Star Wars seems to be what everyone, myself included, needed. So like I don't know if I mean, I
Mhm.
do want you to react to the vitriol of Star Wars and
Yeah.
that entitlement culture that the internet has created, and how it's kind of made us dread a new Star Wars in many ways. Because while I was hoping for Skeleton Crew, I was also a little scared because I'm just like, oh
Mhm.
man, are we gonna Jake Lloyd all these kids? Are we gonna have like all these fans just
Mhm.
go ham and be toxic and negative towards people who are
Mhm.
just trying to do right by the fans who are just trying to make art that they love for the people who
Mhm.
love it, and get spat in the face sometimes. Why don't you
Mhm.
react a little bit to that?
I think you're saying so many wonderful things here, my friend, because I think it's important to discuss kind of what I think at the top of the show we were getting at about where does Skeleton Crew find you as a Star Wars
Mhm,
fan? And you might just be a casual fan. You might be swinging through because you saw this thumbnail and you want to talk about Skeleton Crew Star Wars. But I think it's valuable to analyze how a lot of us are right now as the show's
mm,
begun. What you're describing, this post acolyte world, I love but hate that we yes I have to nod and agree that it feels like 2017. I was in the center of that world. I want to make be clear, my life always my online life and my real life always pretty easy compared to the struggles and battles of other people,
right, right.
make that clear. But being on Collider Jedi Council in that era, coming out of Last Jedi, saying, "Oh, I thought about it, and I really love that film," and then there was like this storm just brewed up around us. That is the canary in the coal mine of all the political stuff going on.
Mhm,
That was not too far after the election. We are a year or so into it at the time, and I think GamerGate never ended, and I think all those things
mhm,
in which the culture war comes to pop culture, it's an easy battleground for them to win. And that's
mhm,
why a lot of the people who were up in arms against Last Jedi, again, we always do the caveats. You can have some legit concerns.
mhm,
We can have those discussions. I love Rise of Skywalker. Other people don't. Let's go in a bar and debate that all day. But the
mhm,
online atmosphere was built up, so even if it wasn't your intention to make it part of a culture war, a lot of people were in line with what was going on, and it became troubling. It became just downright evil and hard to manage at times. It became at best exhausting.
mhm,
That's the best thing I can take out of it is exhausting. And Acolyte, and every Star Wars show has this cycle, and every Star Wars show has the naysayers and complaints and the bad faith. Again, we're dealing with bad faith arguments connected to bigger political agendas or bigger political wins. Um, but Acolyte definitely, for I don't know, obvious reasons, seemed to bring out a lot more.
mhm,
And that was disheartening. The cancellation was disheartening. Now, I'll say this: I do know some stuff. It's there's a lot of business behind the
mhm,
decision, but you can't deny that some of the struggle with numbers just had to do with general casual fans going, "Oh, I heard it sucked."
mhm, mhm,
This guy with the red laser beams on his thumbnail, he says it sucks. I'm not engaging with the fact that his point of view is a pretty racist one. I'm not. I'm just a general fan, and
mhm,
therefore it's this big thing that all adds up. And I came out of Acolyte not done with Star Wars, not done with Force Center, but done with talking about it, done with posting
mhm,
about it, almost done. Finding joy about it. And I was like you when Skeleton Crew was announced. I went, okay.
mhm. Cool.
All right. I kinda did that with Bad Batch too,
Mhm,
and up until Bad Batch has been my favorite Star Wars
mhm,
show, for a lot of reasons. One, because Bad Batch is one of the more overtly political Star Wars
mhm,
shows.
mhm, mhm,
Um, and then here we come to Skeleton Crew. I think we can get into details in the weeds. I think it looks great. I think the writing's sharp. I think the directing 2 episodes in is consistent, and solid and got some wonderful performances and characters we love. Again, all that surface level stuff is just popping off the screen. But I definitely feel there's something beneath it that folks like you and I who are in the trenches a little bit on this, who are beat up, who are seeing other people that they know get beat up even more,
Mhm.
and there's almost nothing you can do to stop it. I think there is a that we took into this show that suddenly 1 or 2 episodes in, I saw it on Disney Plus with everyone else. I don't get the screeners anymore, but like it just was. Oh my god, it was a special kind of fun to
Mhm.
take me forward in the show.
I was very concerned when the screening starts, and obviously you see the Lucasfilm logo, which I always
Yeah,
get shivers. It's because it just brings
yeah,
me back to my childhood. It's
yep,
obviously
yep,
we don't get the 20th Century Fox anymore, which whatever. But seeing that Lucasfilm logo up in the big screen, I mean, even
mhm,
on TV, I'm just like, ooh, we're in for magic. But
yeah,
something about the big screen, man, it's just it hits
it's
on
cool.
all the right ways. But
Yeah,
then we see the field of stars, and then we start getting like the non crawl,
yeah,
and I was just like, "Oh no, come on! Like, don't. Why are you taking yourself seriously?" I thought, like in my mind, I'm just like, this should be just like a quick pan, a kid in a
yeah.
bike, and just like some weird Huttese translation of another '80s synth song, and just like let's get the show rolling.
Boom,
But when,
bum,
yeah,
bum,
yeah,
bum.
yeah, exactly. Which I'm so glad that Lucasfilm finally released a music
Yeah,
video for it.
awesome.
But I had reservations going into it because I'm like, oh, is
Sure.
this show that was marketed to be something that's fun and joyful and kid,
Mhm,
having that je ne sais quoi and naivete of youth and that picaresque energy, now gonna like be taking itself seriously because it's Star Wars.
mhm,
Uh, so that cold open was a little. I'm not gonna miss my words. The cold open didn't really do a lot for me because I
mhm.
felt like it was like I got what they were doing. It's like the pirate
Sure.
ship invading, the other ship, and with the
Mhm.
drawbridge just going in. Like I got it. Like it's a
Yeah,
pirate story.
yeah.
But some part of me was just like, this is just not the vibe, man. It's not landing. But since it shifted gears into the kid story, and we meet Wim and his dad, and we're in the suburbs. I'm just like, here we go. This is what I
Mm,
need. And
mm,
the cinematography is just amazing. It's beautiful. Even though there's
yeah,
volume to it, it still
yeah.
feels very expansive and large in a way that other Disney Plus shows haven't felt. And having like
Mhm,
those big lighting, like backlit
mhm.
things, very Spielbergian. It
Yeah,
was, I don't know, when they're in the forest getting into the ship, and you see like the moon or the lights, whatever, shining through the
yeah.
trees, and it feels very close. It's backwards, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, or
Reverse
or
close.
ET and things of like that. So I'm just like, man, this is hitting
Yeah.
hitting on all the right cylinders. So what was your experience, right, going into the show and like starting and seeing that crawl and
Yeah.
seeing the pirate ships? What was that reaction
Th
to how the show started?
There's nothing better than that moment right before a new Star Wars adventure begins. What even if you're flipping pages through a comic, they usually have it a
Mhm,
long time ago in Galaxy Far, Far Away or in a novel, anything like that. It's my favorite moment,
mhm,
right? That's why we're here, you, me, and so many other people. So I definitely had that too. I totally feel what you're feeling about the cold open, maybe not immediately connecting to you. It's one of those you get it, you got it. I think it does speak to some circles of violence not being broken in the New Republic era.
mhm,
It's
mhm,
got the pirate thing, and it's at times almost a shot for shot recall of the Tantive 4 blockade runner
mhm, mhm,
sequence from A New Hope intentionally, and the creators have said that. So yeah, I had fun with it, but and it's more violent than I think people thought. Again, I think to say, and you're not saying this to be clear, but I've seen a lot of people like, it's a kids show. The creators have said several times, it's not a kids show. It's just a show with kids in it.
But it's interesting
Um,
you mentioned that. I'm sorry to,
yeah,
to cut
no,
you
go
off,
for it.
but I was watching it with my girlfriend, and she was like, "Oh, this is." We actually had that conversation about the
Yeah.
violence in the show, and I was just like, I mean, I don't think it's that violent because I mean, I'm
Mm.
thinking about Never Ending Story and obviously
Yeah.
Goonies and like all these. Ghostbusters was rated PG or G, I don't know.
Mm,
So like, if you think about
mm,
like all the quote unquote kids
yeah.
films and TV shows from the 80s that
Agree.
I grew up in a little later and other people grew up with at the time, like the violence was kind of always there, and I think was kind of the point. So
Yeah.
I wasn't surprised by it. I was kind of not satisfied because I'm sadistic, but satisfied
That's
because I'm
okay.
like,
Go
oh, it makes the stakes of what they're going through real.
Totally. I think in the end, that's why the sequence does work for me. It sets the tone really well. But again, I really agree with what you're saying of like, I got it. Like sometimes you watch something, you're like, I got what you're doing, and you don't need to dwell on it. It picks up right away. I'm with you. I love the time in episode one that we spend in the houses and the school and the suburbs. I love the look. I love the feel. Love the vibe. It's not unlike I was saying today on Force Center and even off air. It's not unlike spending time with Ray on Jakku when we first meet her, where I'm immediately pulled in by this character's story and charm and the environment and how it looked. It had those vibes for me. I really loved that episode. I love spending time there. And I know there's been a lot of understandable debate of the Star Wars suburbs of it all. And we could have that discussion if you want. I've always been like, hey, let's just see it. And now that I've seen it, I think it looks really good. And it's a lived in experience world. You highlighted too how the show looks. It's a valuable conversation to have, one that I'm not an expert on that we can go deeper on. But like this, I think the best shot of the shows is Andor. And Tony Gilroy and team will tell you why. They'll tell you because they didn't touch the volume. They went on location. They spent $250 million. Got it. And it looks amazing. I'm there for the bricks and the screws and the fabrics of the clothes. I love that show. Look, it looks like Rogue One. To me, my favorite shot Star Wars thing of the modern era is Solo, a Star Wars story. Bradford Young's cinematography, the natural light, everything. My favorite. I know it isn't for everyone else, but it is for me. This has a lot of the vibe. But we have not only advancement of the volume technology, because it'd be a lie for me to sit here and tell you that I haven't at times been not pulled out to where I didn't like the shows, but pulled out enough to where I was like, I wish Kenobi was fighting not on a construction site. Like, but the show
seeing the scenes,
yeah. But that show was shot in an at the tail end. Actually, probably not even tail end. If I'm trying to do the calendar math, but Kenobi was shot with still a lot of restrictions on how many people could be on set and where you could go, and the volume kind of helps say that the volume is cheaper. The volume helps with previs and time on post production. So there's a lot of great things. I'm not here to tear it down. And also, there's a lot of shots that I think are real that are the volume. So who am I to say? But Skeleton Crew had a year delay. They continued to work on it. People were posting on Blue Sky. I think Todd Vasari, is that his name? Was saying he's been working on it for the last couple of years. So that is a testament to a lot of times what these VFX people face, which is under budget, understaffed, and overworked. Not just in Lucasfilm. See this a lot in Marvel. You see some of the fights they're going in as a work group. Where they don't have the time to make it look good, and things are put out there, or things are put out early from PR teams. Things are put out there early for just the promotion of the movie, or leaks. God forbid leaks. This show has a different vibe, even though it might have been shot in very much the same way as some of the other shows. And I think a lot of that speaks to time and experts having the time to do what they are, to be experts in the field. It looks wonderful.
It does. It does. I mean, and it's one of those things where, like, again, it's not against the technology, because technology has allowed us to do so many things that we wouldn't have been able to do before. And like in many ways, the volume is the culmination of George Lucas's dream. You know, I think the next step is just getting rid of actors. Which
George would be the first to do that. Yeah.
Which seeing how the AI industry and the politicians that are coming into power behave might whatever. Let's not even talk about that. But you know, but I think about it, and I'm just like, we have to go through the growing pains of when the technology isn't great and people are still figuring out, to get to the point where it's just like, oh, now we know how to use it precisely in a way that it's imperceptible. And I think for me, in that way, Skeleton Crew's a graduation, right? Because when the failing grade in my book will always be Mandalorian season 2. As much as I like that season, it was volume. It's just like the corridor, the one corridor with sets in between where one person just walks back and forth from, and we're just gonna film it from a couple different vantage points, so it feels a little bigger, but you know that they're walking in a very limited radius. And I can't watch Mando season 2 without realizing that they're just like, oh, we can do so many things in the volume, but then they're like, oh, we're doing so many things that we're actually doing none of them. And Skeleton Crew doesn't feel that way, and it feels magical. I think it would be the best way to describe how it feels, because it kind of captures the wonder of Star Wars. It makes it feel small when it has to be, because I feel like one of the good things about all the scenes in the suburbs, and I want to talk about the suburbs a little bit more.
Mhm.
Uh, but all the scenes in the suburbs, one of the great things about it is that because it felt familiar and because it felt small, and I use that term consciously, it makes getting into the pirate ship that's buried and going into space and then seeing the shields and where are all these shields and all of a sudden we're going to
Mm,
hyperspace and you don't get to like experience that mystery makes it
mm,
feel bigger, and then you
mm,
can feel the joy that the kids are feeling. And then in the
mm.
second episode when they get into Port Royal or whatever the hell the name of
Oh, Virgo, yeah.
the pirate island is, a pirate asteroid
Mhm.
is,
Yeah.
you kind of feel that wonder even bigger because you first had to go through the banality, right,
Mm,
of the suburbs.
mm.
But let's talk about the suburbs, because I know
Yeah,
lots of people. I mean, it's a symptom of Star Wars fandom. You have to talk about something because what's a Star Wars fan if not a hater? But
Eh,
in your mind, and
eh,
I think for me it's an interesting conversation, right, as an architect, and I love cities and buildings
right?
and discussing. I mean, one of my favorite albums of all time is The Suburbs by Arcade Fire. I even wrote a paper about it. So the suburbs are a very interesting thing, as are cities,
Mm,
obviously, because in many ways they're opposite approaches to
mm,
urbanizing.
mm,
So in your opinion,
mm.
what's your opinion on the suburbs in Star Wars, and why do you think that the suburbs in Star Wars is controversial, but a a megalopolis isn't
Mhm.
when we have
Yeah, yeah.
mega cities of our own?
The whole planet's a city. Yeah,
Mhm,
I love it. I yeah, you know, so I totally forgot. Yeah, you are an architect. You we should lean on you and your expertise for this conversation. So I first saw this in London, right? When they showed the footage at the London Celebration, they showed the trailer, or the sneak peek, whatever it was, and that's the first time we saw it. And I was really excited about it. I only because God damn it, it looks like ET, right?
mhm,
It
mhm,
looks like Elliot's cul-de-sac, and that's not too far from where I live. I've been
mhm,
up there. It wow, it's amazing. I live in Tim Burton's prison, Burbank. I live where Tim Burton grew up, and a lot of his movies are about this crazy suburb that looks perfect but has a dark
mhm,
side and a dark secret. So I'm there for that. Why it stands out, I go to one of my favorite scenes is Dexter Jetster in his diner
mhm,
in Attack of the Clones. And I still get people who don't accept that I like that scene. I still and they don't even wanna hear about the themes that Joseph Scrimshaw and I have discussed in past episodes. They just like, "How c it's a 1950s diner, this is Star Wars." And I get it. I'm not here to take that angst away from anyone. I get it. But if you look at what it means, 50s diner, it's a place of comfort. It's Kenobi looking for real information. It's the intersection of knowledge and wisdom. It's the failure of the Jedi. It's an important scene, an important location. It means a lot if you stop and break it down. And I think the suburbs represent both good things where a lot of us start in this
mhm,
country. And maybe where a lot of us don't want to end up, and then you got the
mhm,
parents who are just, I'm taking. And by the way, I'm not even factoring in the mystery of Ed Atten yet.
mhm,
There's obviously a mystery. It's not even a secret anymore. 2 episodes in, but just looking at it in terms of storytelling, it's a great place to start. It's a great place to analyze these systems and bold straight lines we all want you to fit into, and what that does to
mhm,
us. It isn't just about running off to join the circus or the hologram circus if you're Neil's family. It is about finding your place and position and what that truly means. And this is the way to do it. I just think it does. We've never seen it before. I think you're right. We either have things like Coruscant or Camino, which have sci-fi kind of aspects to them, or we have Tatooine, Jakku, which seem, this kind of, I call it the Adobe hut in the sand type of
mhm,
like,
mhm,
that's what we think Star Wars is. But George Lucas loved, exploring these cultures via the places they live
mhm,
and how
mhm,
they live. He talks famously about the Utapau being that, and
mhm,
wanting
mhm,
to people to dig 14, 15, 50 levels deep, and what is that kind of life? And I think this is a life that affects us all. A lot of us live in smaller communities,
mhm,
smaller cities, post World War II America. I'm literally in a house moved, not built, moved to Burbank in 1944
mhm,
because everyone was going out to the suburbs. And so this kind of fascinates me to explore it in Star Wars. And then there's just It's also Amblin. It's kids on bikes and force.
And you touched on something that's interesting to me in analyzing what Star Wars quote unquote is, right? Because Star Wars
Yeah.
is nothing, right? Because
Yeah.
all of Star Wars is a frame of reference. Star
Mhm.
Wars is something to everybody based on your insertion point in which you started your galactic journey, so to speak.
Mhm.
So
Mhm. Mm.
for a lot of us, like our perspective in Star Wars starts from our Western point of view, right? So we're,
Mm.
you know, we're
Yeah.
fortunately or unfortunately in the United States, so like our perspective of the world is a U.S. Western centric perspective in which what is
Mhm.
strange and alien is not what is not
Mhm.
European, what is not American, and even European is a little alien. So for me, when we talk about how Tatooine or Jakku
Mm.
or even Hoth and these
Mm.
inhospitable and alien planets, it's like, well, we have this on Earth, right? The Bedouins in
Mm.
Africa, I forget the
Mhm.
countries. Apologies, but you know those adobe structures like exist, like they're George Lucas
Yeah.
didn't make them up, so like that's
Right.
architecture, that's vernacular architecture for cultures that are already a part of the and you
Mm.
know the history
Mhm.
of us as a species. So it's only alien to us because we are not exposed to that. So George did that genius thing of right of like taking
Yeah.
what already exists and then giving it that little Star Wars magic to then make it more exotic. So in
Mm.
many ways, I think it's a disservice, right, to say that the suburbs can't be part of Star Wars because it's like the suburbs could be just as alien for someone who is
Mhm.
to inverse it, who is
Mhm.
from a Bedouin tribe or from someone who
Yeah.
has
Yeah.
never had exposure to Western culture and doesn't know what the
Yeah.
hell suburbs are because they're like, like why would you want to live in some weird semi-urbanized area where you have to get in a car to get everywhere. Like if
Mhm.
you think about it, the suburbs are really a strange concept
Yeah.
to wrap your minds to wrap our minds around. So
Mm. Mm.
that kind of justifies to me like the existence of suburbs. I mean, if I
Mm.
had to do it academically, but in a
Yeah.
but casually, it's just like why not? It's like
Why
there's
not?
there's a plethora
Yeah.
of galaxy, well in Star Wars we know of two so far, but of systems and planets and cultures and aliens, and you're gonna tell me that not one had a suburb? I mean, it's like how small can we be as fans that we can't just accept that
It
plurality, the plurality that we
yeah.
live through here in our lives can also exist in the galactic vastness that is Star Wars. I don't know,
I I
man.
I really love your approach to this topic because I really side with you here, and it's not about right or wrong. If you're out
Mhm.
there and you have a different view, got it. But I love exploring with you the why not of it all. It is, and you mentioned, what is Star Wars? That's a question that we all ask, and we all kind of have our own barometer for
Mhm.
it. And sometimes, yeah, there's sometimes something will hit. I'll be like, I don't know if that's Star Wars to me, but that's my view on it. An example. I ended up coming around on them. Other people wanted to murder other people over them, but the colored bikes in Book of Boba Fett that the mods
Oh
rode,
yeah, yeah.
I liked it because it was a very much, and even Robert Rodriguez had said going into it, oh, we do something with colors that's not really seen in Star Wars before.
Mhm,
And it represented generational change. It represented a different approach. It represented the youth of this area
mhm,
saying, we don't want to be like what was before. It was, of course, connected to the mods of the 70s and 80s. Like
mhm, mhm,
it's
mhm,
all there. And again, it doesn't have to be your number one favorite thing. I just have that vibe of why not. And in terms of, what does Star Wars mean? I think of the I go to the often to the Kingdom of Heaven final scene between Orlando Bloom's character
mhm,
standing off
mhm,
with
mhm.
Saladin after he gives up Jerusalem. And he's like, we asked, what does Jerusalem mean? And Saladin says, nothing, everything. That's Star Wars to
Mhm,
all of us. And every time every week, it's one of the things I got exhausted about over Acolyte, where
mhm.
every week Star Wars was on trial.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
one week it was this, one week it was Kiadi Mundy's birthday, one week,
Mhm.
and it's exhausting
Yeah. What
because,
is his birthday, by the way?
yeah, I never knew and I will never know. You know, I don't answer trivia questions anymore. And it's just like Star Wars is built on why not?
Mhm.
And I think as boring as the suburbs are, that's part of the point.
Yeah.
And the milk's not even blue or green; it's
It's
gray.
gray, yeah. Because one thing that I was thinking about while watching that I was dubious about, and actually, this is why I like doing these reviews, especially doing them talking with someone else, because it helps unlock things
Sure.
that I wouldn't have been able to unlock in my brain if I hadn't been having the privilege of talking about it with someone else. But while I was watching like that first episode and seeing, you know, the suburbs, one of the things that I always kept thinking about is just like, wait, we're in Star Wars. Why do we have cars on tracks? Why
Yeah.
isn't
Oh, yeah.
everyone flying? This just doesn't make
Hmm.
sense. Why are only the speeders the only thing that
Hmm.
aren't on tracks? And then all of a sudden it just dawned on me. So yeah, because at Atten you can't leave the planet, so there are no spaceships. So they have to have that, and that is integral to their culture and like how
Hmm.
they designed like the whole system that they live in. It's again a system of control that's designed to get you to in a monorail basically work
Yeah.
and home, and you cannot, if you're only living in two dimensions, you can't live in the third one. And that's
Yeah.
why the kids leaving the planet is the best thing, because they
Mm.
stop the monotony of 2D and all of a sudden I go into 3D, and
Yeah.
to not only just literally vertically but into the wider galaxy, so to speak. So that
See,
was a
this is why I like
nice
talking about
epiphany.
this with an architect, because you're talking about 3D. You're talking about up and around, and I love it. I love it. You're leaving the paper.
Thank you, thank you. I appreciate it. Well, otherwise I wouldn't have anyone to listen to me. So I appreciate that.
People are listening.
But let's talk about the politics of Star Wars a little bit in that
Mhm.
first episode. And obviously, suburbs are extremely political, as you
Mhm.
said. The suburbs kind of happened in the
Mhm.
U.S. because of the post-war sentiment and wanting to, well, one, sell cars, so we need highways and we need streets,
Yeah.
and one way to get people to drive is to get them out of the city. So
Mhm.
it kind of creates like this illusion of what America is and what
Mhm.
Western culture is, that I think it's interesting to bring up into Skeleton Crew, because it's really talking about what conformity is. And
Mhm.
Star Wars has always been about non-conformity in a world of white clad troopers who are literally whitewashing
Yeah.
the galaxy. Uh, so Skeleton Crew is playing with that a little bit, uh, and obviously not in a warlike scenario like A New Hope did, but
Mm.
in the more insidious way that
Yeah.
society does its warfare on us, and a warfare that we're living right now. Because one of the big things that the unfortunate incoming Trump administration insanely wants to do, or is going to try to do, hopefully it doesn't happen, but it's the abolishing the Department of Education. And as we know, education is one of the keystones of, of growth, not just as a person but in life, and to have a fulfilling development as a human being. And I think that to use education and then the corporate world as like these two antagonists, not enemies, antagonists, because there's a difference
Mm.
between both words. I think it's a really clever way for Acolyte. See, I still have
Mhm.
Acolyte in my mind, for Skeleton Crew to
Good.
bring in like the concepts and politics of what Star Wars always talks about. So, like you said, our friend Scotty has a amazing
Mhm.
thread about it that everyone should go read right now. And obviously, his perspective is a little better than ours probably is,
Mhm.
because he's an educator. But
Mhm.
what was your reaction to seeing like how the show was framed? I mean, it's cliche in a sense, right? Because
Mhm.
if you're a kid, your enemies are your parents, and your enemies
Mhm.
is the school. But
Mhm.
with the with the benefit of now being a little older and being able to look back at all those films, and especially now with Skeleton Crew and all those systems that are introduced there, like what was your reaction to how Star Wars interpreted some of those cliches
Mhm.
in Skeleton Crew?
I am in love with what the show's doing in this particular arena. I saw with the commercials and and the trailers and the footage, even at Star Wars Celebration London, you got again when you hear Goonies in space, Amblin, all those kinds of kids on bikes and forest. It brings up a lot of things. It brings up some of it in classic '80s kind of tropes, and the suburbs, and I was kind of ready for what it is. And it's doing a lot of what I thought it would do in terms of growing up and coming of age. But again, I don't want to separate the mystery of At-Atten
Mhm.
because there's something else going on there, but it factors in. But I'm because it's almost like when we're talking about suburbs and Star Wars, in a way, this isn't even Star Wars, right? This is
Mhm.
a planet that no one knows about. It might have been lost in the High Republic era. All those
Mhm.
answers may or may not come, but with what's there, what we're talking about here is beyond just growing up. It is this that scene with Farah, Carrie Condon, and her
Mhm.
daughter Fern, and just like, I got your, I don't even know if it's a patch or but whatever it was, your token, and I've got your place back. You don't lose your place because
Mhm.
there's not a lot of positions, not a lot of places for you here in the top, and that does to me does not come out of a bad spot as an overbearing, domineering parent
Mhm.
per
Mhm.
se. There's a little bit of that, but like I said up top, I don't think the parents are cast as villains. I think her mother has survived, and not only survived but exceeded and succeeded in spite of a lot of things around her in this society. And out of fear, but out of knowledge, she's trying to hold her daughter in this box.
Mhm.
So it's sad in a way. The Wendell thing, Wem is a latchkey kid, and Wendell has no other option. And I think it's heartbreaking when he's like, "Nah, I can't read you a story. Grow up." That's heartbreaking, and it's
Mhm.
wrong. But he has to do that to survive in this system. Everything is on tracks and rails. So humanity, or Beanatomy, be,
Mhm.
Neil's a human to me. The humanity has been squished out of everyone here, and it's hard. It's hard to take it, and it's the parents probably had this at one point too. Farah probably stole a bike and wanted to get out
Mhm.
of town and cut through the forest as well, and to see the parents have to keep the kids in the same system because that's the only way. I said today on Force Center, one of the big themes in these first two episodes was what the mantra of the pirates is:
Mhm.
surrender or die. And so there's this thought of you surrender to the system or you die in it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And this isn't just about these kids going off to chase dreams and adventures. Because I think even Wim starts out of, I want to have adventures. We know Jedi's don't crave adventure and excitement.
Mhm.
We've heard that a serious mind is required. But he wants to help people. I believe he's nice. He wants a sense of adventure. He wants to get
Mhm.
out of town. But he's doing that in almost with selfish means because every one of his actions centers him in his own story. Even
Mhm.
Neel is a number two. He's a Samwise. He's a Millhouse to the main characters here, to a Frodo and a Bart that Wim is. Um, and so he's not even he's just trying to break free. And it's not just about a simple the kids want to chase their dreams. There's a system here that needs to be broken. I'm not going as far as to say the show or the creators of the show are saying, have we looked at capitalism lately? I'm not
Mhm.
claiming that. But there's a lot of things in it that I'm looking at going, yeah, these parents have to do these things to their kids, trap them, keep them going, make them all want to be analysts, which is not bad. Because if they don't, they believe they die. Surrender to the system or die.
It's very like you like that last bit that you said just reminded me of The Village, M. Night Shyamalan film,
Thank
where,
you. I said this on ForceCenter. It's you and me, buddy. We're the only ones that have said this.
where it's just like the elders just like create their
Yeah.
allegedly idyllic lifestyle with that's
Yes.
actually retro to like because it's
Yes.
what they believe it's going to create like a better future for their
Hmm.
offspring and future generations, and then we just create that this realize that there's a barrier around and it's all an
Yeah.
illusion, uh, which
It's an
I do want to get a
illusion.
little bit into the speculation of what
Yeah.
Atten, or I mean, I was gonna, and I felt really bad about this because I wanted to make this joke, but then I saw our friend Sean Room, the apostate, beat me to it and
I saw
make the
him
joke
post that too.
on
Yeah.
Blue Sky because I was just like, I'm gonna be clever. I'm gonna make the ATATN
Mhm.
joke, but then he beat me
Yeah,
to it. So
he did. He
back,
did.
I kind of like tried to
Mhm.
make it without having to do it, but there it is. Sean beat
There it
me.
is.
But I wanna talk a little bit about what that mystery is because I think it's really interesting. But let's leave that to the
Mhm.
end when we do our responsible speculation bit.
Let's do it.
But I think, yeah, I think one of the interesting things that the show does, and it's, yeah, they're not the enemies, they're just antagonists because like every
Mhm.
parent
Mhm.
inherently, and I mean every child and parent inherently are mirrors to each other, one
Yeah.
of like what could be and the other one of what was, and they're
Hmm.
all kind of the tug of war between both of them, like, oh, what I
Mm,
should be, what I should do, but I want to do, the wants and the needs, and both of
mm,
those things competing with each other, which I think are really interesting in terms of like how both the
mm.
characters, I mean, or both sets of characters, because I think there are
Yeah.
two sets that are doing. You have the two sets of main characters with their two sets of
Yeah.
cohorts, or or mateys,
Yeah.
since we use
Mateys. Aye,
the
mateys.
pirate parlance. But one thing that I was thinking about too, as you were talking about this,
Mm,
was one of the things that I've always liked about Peter Pan
mm,
and Hook by extension is the concept of when Wendy and Peter Pan, when Wendy leaves uh, uh, London and goes into
mm,
Never Land, uh, in the, at least in the stage play. I don't know if in the Disney film the voice actor that plays Hook also plays the father, but at least in the stage play, one of the important things about the story of Peter Pan is that Wendy's father plays obviously her father, but also plays Captain Hook, which
mm,
is then kind of playing with that duality of like what your antagonist is in terms of your father figure and what you imagine them to be, and then returning to the reality of like confronting that
mm,
from within yourself. So
mm.
that's also played, I think, really interestingly in they give that uh, callback at Hook when you hear Dustin Hoffman's voice in the airplane, which is the
Mm.
captain of the plane, and obviously Robin
Right.
Williams is terrified of flying, and you start hearing like how the fantasy and reality of Peter Pan
Mm,
and Hook start melding into each other. So I wonder
mm.
if there had been like an opportunity for something like that, or if that would have been a little too on the nose,
It,
especially with having Jude Law play a pirate, and when he's already played Captain Hook
mhm. Right.
previously in another Peter Pan movie. So tell
Mm.
us a little bit about how you feel about those types of stories, especially looking at Peter Pan and Hook and stories like that.
Yeah. Yeah, the pirate connection is fascinating because when we first heard there was popping up, I think the first I heard about it was Vane was gonna appear,
Hmm.
and then he flew off in Mandalorian season 3 as Gorian Shard dies, and to be
Poor guy.
seen in a
Yeah.
series coming soon to Disney Plus. And I like Vane in the series even more than I think I did Mandalorian. I thought it was just pirates in the sense of Hondo. A Hondo watch is high for the
Hmm.
series. Could Hondo? It's it's so pirate themed, right? Every quarter of it,
Hmm.
and I love that. And
Even
I
the
love
music,
what,
like
yeah, Mick
like the
Giacchino's
slow. Yeah.
yeah, Mick Giacchino's music is wonderful and deserving of the high praise it's already getting. Um, but yeah, just what it means. I noted today on ForceCenter that the pirates. I want to say I'm not condoning the real life historic violence of pirates or anyone else who uses it. I want to make sure caveat, caveat, caveat. But pirates in literature and fantasy and some of these stories you and I are talking about or you're bringing up here often are in opposition to youth. They're
Mhm.
often they represent their own kind of survival. They represent their own kind of outside of the norms. They are cast off in a lot of ways, and they're viewed as dangerous, and many times I'd say rightfully so. But often they are an opposition of youth as these coming of age journeys go on, and I think that's being used to great effect. And I'm curious to see where it goes. And yeah, I love what you talk about with the parental connection with the Peter Pan stuff there. I'm not expecting suddenly Wendell's dad to show up with an eye patch, but it is deep. It is psychological. It is fascinating to see that play out.
I mean, it's a lot of the cave in Dagobah, where Luke
Yeah.
defeats Vader, and all of a sudden the mask explodes, and he just sees his own face. And I think that's what a lot of
Hmm.
these films and stories about youth confronting growing up is. It's just, oh, I don't want to, and we've all gone through that, right? I don't want to become my parents. I'm different.
Yeah.
I'm a rebel. I'm all this. I'm all that. And all of a sudden, there you are. You turn 36, and you're like, oh, I'm paying taxes, and I'm at my desk job, and yeah, like all that rebellion is where
Yeah.
is it? And I think that that's what these stories also do. It's just like, oh, you gotta
Um,
temper. of that
Yeah.
rebellion because it could just not happen. And I think that's what pirates represent. They represent
Mm,
this ideal of freedom and just
right.
doing your own thing and rebellion for rebellion's sake and having no port to go home to call home. But
Mhm,
at the end of the day, it's revealed that the pirate because
mhm,
the freedom is that freedom that they enjoy are just shackles because they have
mhm.
no roots, they have no home, they have
Mm.
no, they don't have the support systems that some of that family might provide. So,
I love what you're saying because this ties into something I've been thinking about
although I
too, and
will say though,
yeah?
historically, pirates have had a really good egalitarian society amongst themselves. I'm not saying let's all
See?
be pirates, but
Right.
in a time of slavery and discrimination
Mhm.
and not a lot of democracy, pirates actually had a pretty good system. But anyway,
It's
I
yeah,
digress.
no, I love real history and the actual stories and things that get passed down and get turned into literature and high fantasy or rides at Disneyland give us a certain view of things that might not be fully correct. You're saying stuff too as this all ties to the parents. Again, pirates standing in opposition of youth or standing in opposition to the society that you're from. Port Burgo stands in direct opposition of At Atten, right?
Mhm,
And that's not different from Luke wandering into the Mos Eisley Cantina. That's
mhm,
kind of the well, I use example today in my conversations of the hobbits leaving the Shire, and the first
mhm,
place to go is to a bar in Bree, and even though the hobbits do know their way around bars and drinking, I will say it's overwhelming on
mhm,
purpose. That's part of these stories. I love the connection to the parents. You're saying some wonderful things there of I keep going back to line of the parents aren't necessarily the villains in the story, but they're doing some things wrong, maybe
mhm,
because they feel they have to or they don't even know. But what this at Atten being revealed as this lost planet of mortal treasure or whatever phrase to use, but treasure.
mhm,
I'm not saying the show is aiming for this or doing this, but it has the vibes of you are lost and you're in a world where maybe you wanted to get past the barriers and stars. And by the way, I think you should, but what you need, what builds you might actually be at home. And it's not
mhm,
necessarily at
mhm,
Atten, but the
mhm, mhm.
treasure, that's the friends we made along the
On the
way.
way,
But I think there's that vibe. There's a great line from one of my favorite bands.
knowledge was their
Knowledge.
treasure.
Knowledge was there. It's a great line from one of my favorite bands, Know and the Whale. It says, "If you can try to get know your parents well. Forgive them too. They're a lot more like you than you can
Mhm,
tell.
mhm,
When they
mhm,
give advice, offer sympathy. They're just showing you who they want you to be." And
mhm,
that's about the lessons that parents learn. And I think you got Wendell and Farah who've been in this system and have dealt with it in different ways, and they just want the best for their kids, even if sometimes that is wrong. And again, speaking in general terms, there
mhm,
are
mhm,
times in real life where breaking from parents or breaking from family is probably the right thing to do. And then maybe you should be a pirate. But I'm just saying in this story, there has that vibe going on of you're all out and about in our galaxy, meaning the Star Wars galaxy we're all familiar with, and your
mhm.
planet is long lost, and maybe you want to get back there. Not just because it's home and you're safe, but like what you're looking for might be there. We'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, all of a sudden, like you saying that it gave me a lot of Moana vibes. Where
Mm,
the island where Moana lived with her family used to be explorers, but then they, like
yeah.
calamities that ensued, decided to stop sailing and just become insular and just kind of forgot about the outside world. And it kind of feels like at Atten. I think it could go one of two ways. It's either a thing where the society itself closed itself off from
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
outside world, and it was like the village, right? Like the village in
Yeah.
Moana, but or the opposite of that, where it's just like a planet that was forgotten by the old
Mm,
republic or something. It's just like, oh, we're gonna set up this security system, blah blah blah, while this big war wages because we have to protect this, and then I don't know. The Yuzong Vong came along and wiped them out, and everyone forgot to turn off the shield, and they just had to
yeah.
create their insular planetary society. So I think it's
Yeah.
gonna be interesting to see like how that
Yeah.
mystery is resolved, even though it's beside the point in many ways.
Yeah. In many ways. Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. It is like Moana, and I do think The Rock will show up. You're right. Is that what you meant?
You're
No?
welcome.
Okay.
Eh, I wasn't gonna sing it because who could beat The Rock at singing? Certainly not me.
Uh,
But
hmm, hmm,
perhaps.
perhaps.
we
Perhaps.
discussed a lot of the first episode. The second episode, I mean, I love the second episode as
Hmm.
well. And the second episode, we saw a brothel. We saw the
Hmm.
red light district, literally,
Yep.
which I
Yep.
was kind of surprised by. That one surprised me more than the violence, I will say. Uh, Seeing
Yes.
the red
Yes.
light district in a quote unquote kids show, even though it's not a kids
Hmm.
show, but it is a kids show, was surprising to say the least. But makes sense, right?
Hmm.
If you like
Yeah.
you were referencing the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, and I remember when I went to Disney World and I was all but a scrappy young lad.
Hmm.
There were the wenches
Yeah.
and in the red light district in Pirates of the Caribbean as well. So it fits the theme, but
Yeah.
uh, lots of things happen there. Besides that, obviously, let's not hyper focus
Hmm.
on one aspect of the show. But I think the interesting thing that happens besides SM 33, or let's just call him Smee,
It's me.
uh, doing like a great battle scene, but we finally get to see Jude Law's character, who may or may not be the captain from the beginning of the cold open in the first episode, and we see
Hmm.
him use the Force and present himself as the rebellious adult alternative to the kids that their parents are not. So we don't get to see a lot of him, but we get to see him use the Force. So
Yeah.
what was your reaction to Jude Law's character, Jod, whatever the hell his name is?
Jod, whatever the hell, Jod
Yeah,
Denarwood, and then we have Captain
something like that.
Silvo. Yeah, I'm good with saying that that's most likely him with a 90%, I think. Yeah, I love this. I know there is sometimes understandable pushback against, hey, yet another Jedi character in a
Mhm.
time when we all thought maybe Luke was supposed to be it until he rebuilt things, and I think I get that and I have conversations about that often. I think this could be slightly different. I think it is slightly different. I don't necessarily think at this point. Again, I could be proven wrong, and by the way, I love when the shows prove my theories
Mhm, mhm.
wrong. That means it's unpredictable or out of, what I was expecting. I don't think he's an Order 66 survivor. I don't necessarily think he's a Jedi per se, but I think he's got the Force,
Yeah,
and I think what this
like many
represents.
people do in the galaxy.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think what it represents to me is an adult who has lost their touch with the magic that they have inside.
Mhm.
And his reasons for engaging the kids at this point is clearly selfish. It's clearly survival. It's clearly, yeah, I'll get you out of here. And that has ties to what Treasure Island and Long John Silver and all that stuff. Yeah, I get it. And that makes a lot of sense. But I like that moment. It was something that had been revealed, so we knew it was coming, but I think it was great. I think it was really effective. I think that's Mick Giacchino's best music is that Force theme that shows up. It's
Mhm,
one of my
mhm.
favorite uses of the Force theme. I
Yeah.
love how it hits.
Because
I
it
love when it
transforms.
hits.
It doesn't begin exactly as
Mhm.
Force theme that we know and
Mhm.
love. It's like when we see the camera
Very
pan
smart.
in one direction and you start hearing notes that are
Mhm.
evocative of it, but when the camera pans back to Jude Law is when we get the pirate
Mhm.
version of the Force theme, which I thought was. I mean, I had my doubts about it. I was like, like,
Sure.
should we have the Force theme in something that's non Skywalker adjacent? But it's called the Force theme. He used the Force. It's fine at the end
Yeah.
of the day.
He used the Force, man. Yeah, I'm with you. And again, I could be completely wrong on what or misreading what they're going to do with this character, but I just think having him around, this being a story that is with kids, but not just for kids.
Mhm.
We face these struggles all the time. You had a little bit more dreams as a kid, or you were someone different, or you on a different path, and that all gets buried for whatever reasons. Often just because you're trying to survive in this system. And Jude Law's Jod Nawad, or whatever his name will actually be, probably came up in that too, and came up in a time where having the force and having force abilities wasn't a great idea
Mhm.
to be
Mhm.
vocal or public about. So he lost his way, and clearly right now it's starting
Very
off as
Kane
a
and Jarrus coded in many
kid
ways.
and Jairus, yeah, and it's very transactional right now with the kids. We know that, we get that, but I'm looking forward to seeing his transformation as well as the kids.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to a lot of Skeleton Crew, even though it's only 8 episodes. So I mean, we
I
only
know,
have six left because we had that dual episode premiere.
I
And I mean,
know.
as always, we could be talking forever about these shows because there's so much to dissect. But before we start signing off, like I said, responsible speculation. We talked a little bit about, and when I say we, like I threw my little theory about Atten there. But Ken, I'm looking forward to hearing like what you think.
Mm,
obviously this isn't like like I said, this isn't Star Wars Explained. We're not here to tell you Easter eggs and how if this is Old Republic, First Jedi Temple, all that stuff. This is
mm,
about talking about themes and what it means to us.
yeah, yeah.
But it's always fun to be like, oh well, maybe this will happen or that will happen. So we
Mm,
talked a little bit about who Jod may or may not be. We talked about Atten and its mysteries. What do you think? Like, what do you think are going to be the big surprises? What do you think they're going to be
mm.
revealed as? Or if you don't want to speculate, tell us what you're looking forward to the most in Skeleton Crew.
No, I love speculating. I'm just so bad at it. I usually do wait for Alex and Molly to put out their videos, and
Yeah,
I just go,
much better than
"Hey,
anything I could do.
what he said." And Alex has done some great detective work
Yeah.
this week already with the T&E's symbols on
Mhm.
Atten, which represents some old Republic stuff, but it has Arabesh. They know the word wizard. They know some things. It seems to have been connected at one point. The reference to Great Works and Lena So and the High Republic stuff. I kind of like where you started out. Love to hear more what you said of just like this is thematically can tie into fear and
Mhm.
the desire to save your own power, whether the government, this planet, lock themselves off out of protective fear
Mhm. Mhm.
that destroys, but also preserving their position. I think it's something to do with that, and I think this planet has been lost since the time of the High Republic. We are roughly 5 years after the fall of the Empire. We don't
Mhm.
know the exact years, but we're after this time. We know it's in the quote unquote Mandoverse. And I don't think will directly affect that. I know there's been some wild theories out there, but the fact that they're not lost in the unknown regions, but they're
Mhm.
lost in the galaxy that we know. You know, they might run into Grogu and
Yeah.
Din on the journey. Who knows?
Maybe it
But
was Sifo Dyas who removed the planet
maybe,
from the archives.
yep. And man, now we need to go to Dexter Jetster Jr.'s diner and
Yeah.
figure
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
But I think it has to do with that. I think at one point clearly it was cut off. I think the reasons are out of fear and desire to save power. And that's why they don't want the system bucked, whoever is in control.
Was there? Because I know we got to see the credits, and I think if I recall correctly, and I probably am not. The credit had like a rebellion crest or of the New
Mm,
Republic, or did I miss see that? I haven't rewatched
that's
the
a,
episode, so I'll need to
have
see
to look.
because if it did have the rebellion crest, it kind of pokes holes into my
Hmm.
theory of being cut off. But if it didn't, then it would
Yeah.
make sense, and I would love that because then if it is what you're saying, it was cut off during the High Republic. I'm just like, hey
Hmm.
man, more acolyte connective tissue. It's just like
Yeah.
acolyte lives, baby. So
Acolyte lives.
so
Acolyte
yeah,
does live.
it
Yeah, man. Yeah. This is imagine if four kids from Atlantis showed up in Las Vegas, New
mhm.
York. You know,
I like that. That
there
was
you
good.
go.
Maybe that was the pitch that they did
Maybe that was the
for the
pitch.
show. Ken, this has been amazing. Thank you so much
Mm,
for taking the
thank you.
time to. I mean, it should have been us, but to talk to me and try and be on Triad of the Force has
Yeah.
been a long time coming.
Mm.
Uh, Always, I've loved your energy, so it's great to have had you here. This is an
Yeah,
amazing
man.
conversation. Before we wrap up, though, what are you up to? What's Force Center up to? And is there anything that that everyone that's listening and watching should be on the lookout for?
Sure. No, I appreciate it, my friend. Absolutely honored to be here, and I'll come back when it is a fully formed and functional triad. Just don't invite Alden Diaz. Could you just keep him away from me for once? Look, Force Center is now entering its 11th broadcast year. So if you're just hearing about us, jump on board. If you've been here from the beginning, we appreciate you. Head to our YouTube page, go to our podcast page. We're doing a lot more. Joseph's been out filming his first feature film, Dead Media. But he'll be back in the saddle with us next week. But Jennifer and I have had a ton of fun breaking down the series. As far as my own stuff, go to my website, catnapzok.com. I got stand-up comedy dates and all those good things coming your way. And my book, Why We Love Star Wars. It's in its fifth year of existence. So it's definitely celebrating a different era of Star Wars.
Mhm.
It's not got Disney Plus in it. But if you want to pick up a personalized copy, it's in the shop on my website as well.
And we will leave descriptions down the link below so that everyone who couldn't catch all of that will be able to just click on it and be able to find you because obviously Force Center is one of the staples in the Star Wars community. So please make sure to follow them if you haven't already, and definitely follow Ken for some amazing and hilarious content.
Mm,
So once again, thank you, Ken.
thank you.
Uh, and I have been Goose from Trial of the Force. Signing off. Thanks everyone for joining our premiere episode of our Skeleton Crew review series that does not have a catchy title. With that, we have in Triad of the Force. Thank you so much. If you like everything that you have seen or everything that you have watched, please make sure to share, like, subscribe, leave a comment, do any of the things that allegedly help the algorithm. It hasn't helped in 4 years. It will probably not help in the coming four. But we definitely appreciate your continued support. But with that, we're looking forward to chatting more Skeleton Crew next week. Ahoy, Avast, all of those pirate sign offs. But as always with Star Wars, may the Force be with you.